For me, that was definitely a learning opportunity. And I definitely discovered things I didn't know before. So thanks to this analysis, I hope that you're also going to learn something new and different. And the reason why we actually did this research is because there is lots of confusion around bioplastics. And this is an important topic, specifically for the hospitality industry. Restaurants are dealing with takeouts, specifically now since the COVID started, we had a lot of takeouts. So lots of outlets and people started being more conscious about, the single-use items that we receive maybe daily or when we order the food. And so people started looking for alternatives. And those alternatives sometimes are bioplastics, or they say that they are biodegradable or compostable. And so we started wondering, are they really better than their plastic counterparts, or what is the difference, and how they can be actually used, or is there a way to use them properly, compose them properly, dispose of them properly, specifically in Hong Kong. So I think that all came, that was kind of like a natural evolvement of our research this year. So we started with different types of waste and with waste in general. And then, as we went over from plastic to food waste and generally understanding the waste management system in Hong Kong, we realized that probably we should really look into the alternatives to plastic because it's an interesting area. So that's what it is for today. The report is already on our website. We're going to definitely send you a link after this session. But Camille is going to present you a couple of interesting facts, and she's going to run you through the report, and hopefully we will have an interesting discussion afterwards. If you have any questions, please do put them in the chat, and we're going to discuss them as we go. So Camille, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lucia. I'm very happy to be here today. I see a lot of similar and I see that a lot of you come from actually the recycling industry or the bioplastics research. I see that Christelle Knott is with us today, so I'm very happy to see also Marin. So yeah, welcome to all of you to this brief. So as Lucia said, bioplastics is a very hot topic. It's interesting because it's presented as a material that has a potential to replace plastic, but also because there is a lot of confusion around the term, just as Lucia said. So I'm going to share my screen now with you okay, Lucia, can you see my screen?
Yes, it's perfect.
Great. So I'm going to put it like that. Okay, great. So today, as you all know, like more and more countries are banning single-use plastics or SUPs. So France actually took some bold steps regarding that matter, following some European Union's guidelines. So the 1st of January 2020, they banned plastic plates and cups in bulk sold in supermarkets. They also banned cotton buds and still water bottles. Next year, they're going to go further, and they will ban plastic straws, disposable cutlery, stirrers, takeaway cups, lids, confetti, styrofoam containers, and they also are going to put a penalty for excessive plastic wrapping, and they're going to deploy bulk distribution services. So that's great. But this summer when I went to France to see my family, I actually saw that a lot of these products that are supposed to be banned were already replaced by bioplastics. So as there are more and more countries banning single-use plastics, what will emerge as the alternative, and are bioplastics the solutions? So before thinking about who's going to save us from SUPs, let's get acquainted with the main character of our study. I'd like to ask you which words come to your mind when I say bioplastics. So you can unmute yourself and share with us, or you can just write in the chat. I will let you a few seconds to do that. Okay, no one. Okay, so the main terms that revolve around bioplastics are these terms usually. There is a Yeah, exactly. Biodegradable, plant-based, plastic made from plants. These are all great terms to exactly. And Marion, plastic from oil or plant. You're right. We're going to see that in a second. So these are the terms that we usually think about when we think about bioplastics. So they're different, and it's really important to like describe them, because they all like quite positively connotated, right? Biodegradable sounds great. Compostable sounds great as well from an environmental perspective. But in order to continue this presentation, if you want to really understand what is bioplastics, I will need you to be clear on what those terms on the screen mean. So first, let's start with degradable. So all plastics are technically degradable, even traditional plastics made of, any type of plastic, in the way that they can be broken down into tiny fragments due to the factors like UV rays, sea waves, salt, heat, or humidity, for example. Then there is biodegradable. So biodegradable plastic means that the material can be broken down by microorganisms and turned into biomass, water, and CO2 or methane if there is no oxygen. However, it doesn't say anything about the time frame in which the decomposition will be done, or under which conditions it will biodegrade. Then there is another term, which is compostable. So compostable is very similar to biodegradable. So compostable plastics will biodegrade most of the time in very specific conditions that are reproduced in an industrial composting facility. So actually, when we're going to see that later, but compostable in the terms of bioplastics, it means that it's going to biodegrade in an industrial composting facility. So there, the microorganism will break it down as well into biomass, water, inorganic compounds, and it's going to be at the same rate as other organic materials in the compost pile. And it's going to leave no toxic residue in the compost. So if the terms biodegradable and compostable are so confusing, it's because while everything that is compostable is biodegradable, not everything that is biodegradable is compostable. So compostable is a more restrictive term when it comes to the degradation of plastic. This is why it usually has a time frame attached to it, and it varies across individual composters and their specific requirements. So generally, a compostable plastic will degrade within 80 days, so around 12 weeks. And it's 12 weeks because it's the time it usually takes in order to get a stable compost with low microbial activity left. Which means that if we don't describe the length of time and the types of environment required, the term biodegradable, as it's currently used alone, does not distinguish between a product that will biodegrade in the soil within several years and one that will biodegrade in a compost pile in like a much shorter time. And then the last term that I'd like to describe here is bio-based. So bio-based polymers are polymers that are obtained from other sources than petroleum, mainly renewable ones. And that's it. That's what it says. It doesn't say if the material is biodegradable or compostable. Moreover, there is no universal standard for which percentage of biomass is needed to be called bio-based. So bio-based actually can mean blends of different materials with only a small percentage of polymers obtained from renewable sources. So you have some labels that can certify a minimum amount of biomass in the bioplastics, in the bio-based plastics, sorry, but usually, I mean, they're not put on the plastics. So now that we are clear with the definitions, let's see what bioplastics are. Yeah, so this is bioplastics, this graph. So it's a bit impressive, but let's go through it together. So let's start with the bio-based one. So that's the top part of my graph. So the bio-based one, as I said, are made from renewable feedstock. They can be biodegradable, like starch blends here on the right, or non-biodegradable. So it means that some bioplastics actually are not biodegradable. They are mostly drop-in plastics. So what we call drop-in plastics are plastics that have the same molecular structure than the conventional plastics. So you see they're called bio-PET, bio-PE, bio-PP, because they have the same structure. So just like conventional plastics, they're not biodegradable. And these drop-in plastics these drop-in plastics, so which are non-biodegradable, represent about 45.5% of the global production. So that's quite high. Then we have biodegradable. So on the right part of the graph. So biodegradable, we have the biodegradables that are bio-based, but we also have biodegradables that are fossil-based. So actually, like Marin said at the beginning, we have bioplastics that can be made out of oil, just like regular plastics. So that's it. That's bioplastics. So it can be, it's an umbrella term for a very different, a broad plastics, types of plastics. So they can be either bio-based and biodegradable, or they can be both, like the starch blends. And actually, the bioplastics that are both bio-based and biodegradable, they represent 55.5% of the global productions. And then finally, they can also be blends. As we said, in bio-based plastics, they can be blends. So it's really a big umbrella for a big number of material, actually. And that's where most of the confusion comes from, because you really need to specify what you're talking about when you're talking about bioplastics. Why does it sound like a good idea then? So first, as we said, there are some bioplastics that are meant to mimic the fossil-based one, and that's great because we know that plastic is a great material. It's like it can be transparent, flexible, it can be molded and stuff like that. So it's great to have the same properties as plastic. That's what we want if we want to replace plastic with other types of material, right? So that's great. Then, of course, it's going to be it's going to be made of renewable feedstock. So like soy, cornstarch, food waste, there are a lot of renewable feedstock that can be turned into bioplastics. Because today we are heavily reliant on fossil fuels to create plastic. Actually, over 90% of plastic produced are derived from virgin fossil feedstock. And COVID has only worsened the trend because now the oil industry is trying to switch more to plastic production to keep their margins because of the loss in transportation sector. So they try to lobby governments to remove SUP bans by claiming claiming plastic is more hygienic when there is actually no scientific proof of that yet. And anyway, who says renewable feedstock also says reduce carbon footprint. Well, this is true for the most part. It needs to be nuanced a bit. So it depends on the feedstock used. And so the feedstock will also tell which type of bioplastic we're talking about. So as you see here on my graph on the right, this is the climate change impact that's the reduction of carbon footprint depending on the different bioplastics. And as you can see, for example, PLA, a negative climate change impact compared to fossil-based ones would mean that it's actually a little bit like worse. Like a positive one is good, a negative one is a bit less good. So there is a wide range. And so for example, in general, for bioplastic feedstock that need fermentable sugar, sugarcane and sugar beet are preferable to cereal crops when it comes to the carbon footprint. And it also depends, of course, where it's produced. Then we also have some bioplastic that can be recycled. So as I said, drop-in plastics are supposed to be the same molecules as the traditional ones. So technically they can go through the recycling facilities. And here, please, any expert in the room about recycling, tell me if you have some objections or if there are nuances that need to be added, but generally it's that. And so yeah, so technically drop-in plastics and starch blends and PLA can be recycled for different reasons, but they can be recycled. We will see later why in practice recycling bioplastic is complicated. And lastly, so it adds end-of-life options. So bioplastics can basically go through the whole range of end-of-life options for normal plastics. So as I said, recycling, they can be burned, they can be sent to landfill, of course, but they add two options, so composting and anaerobic digestion, which means that by adding these two end-of-life options, it also allows for co-benefits. So for example, as you might know, plastic that is contaminated by food waste cannot be recycled. And plastic that contaminates the food waste, contaminates the food waste composting streams, right? So if you send plastic into composting, it ruins your compost, right? So by using compostable plastics, there would be no need to separate the bioplastic items from bio-waste, and it would make it easier to separate food waste. So this is called a co-benefit. That's what we call the co-benefit. However, so all the advantages I listed here don't really pass the reality check. So first, as you might have understood, bioplastics are complicated. Even me, when writing the report, when I was reading, it was really, I needed to concentrate a lot to know what I was reading exactly. So even biodegradable or compostable bioplastics regroup, in fact, different types of polymers, different type of molecules. So it's really complicated. These terms are also seldom defined by brands when they are used. So let's take, for example, compostable. So as I said before, compostable means it can be composted in an industrial facility with certain standards of temperature, humidity, and a certain time frame. So here I put it on the screen. So as you can see, these are not natural conditions. And also, like, different composting facilities have slightly different standards, so which complicates a bit the matter. But anyway, this is why you shouldn't expect that bioplastics would disappear in nature. That's just not meant for it. So I put the screenshot of this video, a very interesting video from Dave Hackens that I recommend. It's really interesting and it's accurate about bioplastics, and it's a very fun way. He put it in a very funny way, but he makes the experiment of like letting bioplastics in different environments for a year. And of course it doesn't biodegrade because it's not meant for it. So that's the thing with compostable. It's really misleading because you would expect, well, if it's compostable, then it can biodegrade in nature, right? But it's not the case. It really needs a certain environment that is created in this industrial composting facilities, which means that if it cannot biodegrade in nature, it doesn't solve the problem of littering, and it doesn't reduce the problems of, for example, the plastic soup in the ocean. It still has very bad consequences on the marine life and still like breaks down. So Christelle might tell you a bit more about that. But yeah, so that's really misleading actually for the end consumer. So the labeling system for bioplastics doesn't help. So as you can see here on the seedling logo, which is a logo by European Bioplastics, it says compostable. It doesn't say industrially compostable or compostable under certain conditions. So it's really hard for the consumer actually if you don't read a 17-page report written by Green Hospitality. And also bioplastics, just as I said, look like normal plastic. So it's easy to sort them in the wrong recycling streams. And they can even be hard to differentiate in sorting facilities where they have like mechanical means to sort the plastics. It's the case, for example, for PLA, which has a similar density to PET. So PLA is a bioplastics and PET is the plastic that is used to make, for example, the bottles for the drinks. So as such, they can contaminate the recycling streams. So PLA can contaminate the PET recycling streams. And also, as you have seen, there are many different types of bioplastics, but they all fall under the resin identification code 7, which is for other. So if you don't have like a more detailed mention or a more detailed label, actually it's quite hard for the consumer to know what he or she should do with it. So it's really, for the consumer, it's really confusing to know where to throw away their bioplastic cup. And this is the case if there is a proper waste management system that can take bioplastics. So it's even worse if you don't have that. So ultimately, as you might understand, it all depends on the local waste management facilities. And if you were with us for the brief about waste management in Hong Kong, or if you've read the report, this won't be new. But if you've done that, you know that then bioplastics are really not a good idea for Hong Kong. So let's see why. So first, Hong Kong has a very limited capacity for recycling PET, PE, or PP. So they cannot like drop in plastics that are supposed to be similar and recycled in the same recycling streams. They cannot be recycled through this method. Then, like traditional recycling, developing new recycling capacity to recycle bioplastics all depends on the economic incentives and the costs for making this new stream. So actually, it was the case for also the development of bioplastic. It was an economical reason that explained why bioplastics didn't develop before. Actually, bioplastics, the concept was created in the late 1800s. But the discovery after World War II of large crude oil reservoirs halted the growth of their development, as they could not compare on price with fossil-derived plastics. So all the research and development went to fossil-based plastics, and that's why today, like the research is catching up, but we still see that the production and also the research and development in bioplastics is a bit like behind in terms of like the large-scale applications. So anyway, it's the same for recycling. So to reach the critical mass that makes it economically viable to start a new recycling stream for starch blends and PLA in Hong Kong, we will need to switch about 25% of the plastic we discard for PLA and starch blend. And also, as you might know, there is no food waste segregation system in Hong Kong, which means that there is no co-benefit, which is sad because according to the Netherlands Institute for Sustainable Packaging, I quote, biodegradable bio-based plastic should only be used in situations where there is a co-benefit, mainly the increase in consumer separated food waste. So the fact that Hong Kong doesn't have a food waste segregation system is actually a big problem if we want to use bioplastics here. And finally, the last reason why Hong Kong waste management is not ideal to have a lot of bioplastics is because Hong Kong has very little industrial composting capacity. So for example, OPARC 1, the first part of a network of organic waste treatment facilities, is designed to recycle source-separated food waste with only a small amount of inerts. So as such, biodegradable plastic would not degrade fast enough and would likely be screened out by OPARC 1 pre-treatment system. And also, I forgot to mention, as I said, bioplastics can be incinerated, but we don't have an incinerator in Hong Kong yet. So it means that almost all the bioplastics in Hong Kong end up in landfill. But it doesn't have to be so. So, for example, the restaurant Mana, I know I use this example a lot, but what they do about their packaging is actually quite inspiring. So they have all their packaging made compostable, and they compost it through private composters. So they make sure that their packaging, their compostable packaging, is taken care of. And they also made custom-made bins to indicate clearly to customers what goes where. So that's the picture I have on my slide. So that's it about the report. What we're trying to say here is not bioplastics are good or bioplastics are bad. What we want to say is that the use of bioplastics or biodegradable plastics or compostable plastics, or really any type of material aiming at replacing plastic, also have an impact. There are no magical solutions to the waste problem. All the materials come with responsibilities from the companies and the customers. Their impact depends on a lot of different factors. And just having the mentioned compostable on a coffee cup doesn't make it necessarily better for the environment. Companies that decide to replace plastics should try to know what's going to happen once the item is discarded, how it is manufactured, etc. And mostly they should educate their customers so that they can do the right thing, so that they can know where to throw away the packaging that they're using. Because honestly, I don't think that everyone in Hong Kong is going to read the report. So we need really a clear labeling system if we want to develop the use of bioplastics. And actually, in single-use plastic, the plastic part is only half of the problem. Single-use is as much an issue than plastic. Some critics actually say that the existence of such alternatives like bioplastics steers the focus away from that point, from the point that we should have less single-use items. So when you see a nice bioplastic label on a packaging, think about it. And if you have the choice, maybe choose the product without packaging instead. So that's it for me. And yeah, please don't hesitate to ask questions if there are points that aren't clear, or to share your insights with everyone else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Camille. So that was what is in the report, probably even more. It's quite technical, but I think it's also quite easy to understand for a normal person, not non-scientific person. I have read your report, obviously, so I could understand what you meant by that, and so that was fantastic for me to learn something really new in a quite easily understandable manner. I'd like to invite the questions from the audience. There's lots of people who actually know a lot about plastic and perhaps even the bioplastic. So I'd like to encourage a discussion. We have about 15 minutes for that because we actually have another event coming up right after this session. So if you have questions, let's start putting them in, in the chat. We've got Iris. Thank you very much for the report, Camille. May I ask your view on the term of home composting and whether this distinction can further address bioplastics that are certified with this through TÜV Austria? Do you have any knowledge about that, Camille?
So I've read some, so there is actually a section of the report dedicated to labels and the standards, different standards, the American ones, the European ones, the East Asian ones. So home composting is actually like there are not a lot of labels. I think there is only one or two, as you said, Austria, and I think Belgium has one. But yeah, I think it's home composting is a good step in the way that it actually clarifies about bioplastics and how you can take care of them. It's less confusing than just compostable, and I think it would be more helpful actually to switch it in the other way and say non-home compostable. That I think that would be more helpful. But I actually have no experience with this kind of plastics, so I don't know how it works at home if you want to compost this kind of plastics, if it was your question.
Okay, I think we've got another question. Hopefully that explains ours out. I'm not sure. Feel free to give us more comments. Then we have Amandine. Do you see regulations being discussed in Europe on labeling the different types of bioplastics to secure more ethical, sustainable practices? This is more towards Europe, so I'm not sure, Camille, you have overview of that.
So again, there are European labels, mainly by there is a center for regulations and labels on bioplastics. So it exists. I know actually that, for example, Wedgware, which operates in Hong Kong, has the 3 certifications. So from Europe, the US, and Japan, I think. So there are regulations, but so especially for bio-based plastic, as I said, the labels are different, so there is no consensus on bio-based and the percentage of biomass you need in the feedstock. So I think it could be improved, especially in the like unification. But again, as a lot of these standards also depend, I mean, it also depends on the industrial composters, right? For example, if we're talking about compostable plastics. So bioplastics, I feel, is really, really linked to national and very local waste management systems. So I guess that's why universal like consensus on standards might be a bit hard. Even at the scale of the European Union, the countries are still very, very different with very, very different infrastructure. So so yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know. Yeah, it answers.
Is Amandine? Yeah, it does answer, and thank you very much, Camille. And I'm just wondering, so if we see in Europe those regulations coming to limit the production and the distribution of single-use plastic,
yeah,
the intent is really to have a significant impact on plastic pollution. But then, if on the other hand we let bioplastic that are not being processed correctly at a large scale, then we're coming back to the starting point, right? So how can we influence those regulations? Like how are we lobbying to maintain the spirit of that initial regulation that should prevent plastic pollution and reduce plastic pollution when industrials are coming back with bioplastic that are still polluting the oceans?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's actually like the whole aim of this report. It's to say, well, the solution might be a little bit better because still it's for like part of them, bioplastics are made from renewable feedstock, which is something that is, some would argue, better, even if there are also like concerns about the land we use to produce these bioplastics, and also that we use food that could go to humans to make bioplastics. So there are a lot of different issues like that, and we explore it more in the report. I haven't talked about it here because it's quite detailed, but yeah, so that's the whole problem. And actually, so when you were talking, when I was doing research about the bans of the European Union, what they say, and I put it in my slide, they say where alternatives are easily available and affordable, single-use plastic products will be banned from the market. So it assumes that you need to have an alternative to plastic, but indeed it doesn't say like which alternative. And to complement that, I've seen a report about the UK government, I think, that is trying to dig a bit more into the effects of bioplastics and if it's really better or not. So I think it's still quite new. This regulation of the European Union is like from last year or 2 years ago, I think. And bioplastics are really evolving rapidly. They are, I know that during the research, I've seen that there was a new one. I don't remember its name, but it's in the report that should arrive soon in 2023, I think. So it's a field that is evolving constantly. So I guess the policymakers also need to adapt
Evolve
to that
very quickly. As quickly as industrials, yes. Thank you, Kenny.
Right, thank you. And we have also Iris mentioning that the TUV certificates are for both home composting and industrial composting. So there is distinguishing two different labels that you can put on your products, and they in particular use the home composting one to just ensure that it actually does not stay, well, it cannot be composted essentially in the industrial facility. So
nice.
Aaron has a question. How do we best address the issue with companies who already have switched to use the bioplastics in their own efforts to make a difference, even if slightly it's misguiding? So have you seen any sort of best practices on that while you did your research? I don't think there is so much known about this issue in here in Hong Kong, but I think from what I understand, what is happening in Europe, there is quite a pushback on the bioplastics. So even though they exist, what European Union is trying to do is to actually increase recycling of plastic because there is so much of it already. And rather than actually introducing more of the bioplastics. So I would really recommend you to go and see Kamal's report, because I was in particular interested in the carbon footprint and the climate change aspect of bioplastics, which was the thing that I considered the most, was what is the difference between regular plastic? Because yes, we know that if we can say have certain streams of plastic on the market and we can effectively recycle them, it might be actually a solution for the moment, at least if we can capture them, right? That's the if. You have to be able to capture them, and so you could recycle them. So that's part of the circular economy. It's the first step. Now bioplastics are disposable, as you said. Like that's, if you just want to dispose, it's always going nowhere, right? So what are we doing? They have to be compostable. And then the question would be for me, can we use this compost for anything? Because if you just turn it into compost, that's again pile of trash. And is this a good quality compost that comes out of composting biodegradable or bioplastics, right? So the fact is that it's still a single-use item. And so I think we're trying to advocate here a bit more for circularity. So unless we know what even happens with the biodegradable, compostable item at the end of its life, then this is what really matters to us in a way, but also how much CO2 is emitted along the way for this product. So there's actually a quite interesting graph in the report by that Camille introduced, which is a comparison between conventional plastic and the CO2 emissions and the bioplastics, right? So yeah. I think it's something also to keep in mind, because there is a land use, there is a water use, there is a lot of other things that we need. Right, pesticides. So there's lots of ifs that come into play here. And so I would recommend us to think about that way. Yes, companies have introduced this with a good intention, and a lot of companies have introduced that with a good intention. I think now is to dig deeper. Whenever we go and try to apply innovation, that's fantastic, but I think we take one step at a time, and then opens the door for another step later. And I'm sure that also the people who, or the innovators, the companies who have these solutions are also thinking alike, because they have started this project hopefully with an aim to help reduce carbon footprint or the pollution. So I think we're working with them really closely, also with the innovators, and giving them this feedback from the users and from the academics and from all the parts of the society is very important to push the innovation forward. There's no, I think, probably a very easy solution, because especially big companies, if they have switched to having now some sort of bioplastic or a different material in their operation, it's quite difficult to just suddenly go and switch to something else. And again, question will be, to what are we going to switch to? So it's a whole system change, which happens slowly and gradually, I'd say. And so what we can help with is to, keep on thinking with our stakeholders. So if you're out there and you want to think about this, we're happy to think about like, how can we reduce the amount of single-use items rather than actually having even these alternatives in place, or then assess which alternatives are better than the ones that currently you're using, or is this the best option that we can find on the market at the moment? But circularity is probably always, that's my first choice. Yeah,
exactly.
We've got a couple of questions more. So Crystal is asking, during your presentation, did you see any research to investigate the presence of microplastics or nanoplastics from the degradation of bioplastics?
Thank you, Christelle, for the question. I know that it's an area that particularly interests you. But so I think I have read that it would become microplastics, but I don't remember the source. I think I read it on National Geographic or something. So if you want, I'd be happy to dig a bit more into that to see if I can find the source. And if you're interested in the source, I can send it to you if you want. But I think that's also what a lot of articles were trying to say when they say that it doesn't, for example, reduce the plastic soup problem. It also means that bioplastics don't degrade, like are not unharmful when they end up in the natural environment.
Yeah, thanks a lot. But in fact, it may even be because they may produce microplastic or nanoplastic faster than the other. So in the short term, it may be. So it would be interesting to have more scientific data on the rate of these processes.
So for those who don't know, Crystal is a researcher on microplastics at Hong Kong University. So Crystal, I hope that you're going to make that happen.
Yeah, we have started to do some research on that and comparing and put some bioplastic, for example, on the rooftop and looking at how they behave.
Great. So hopefully soon we will know a little bit more about that. I've got still some questions here. Felix is asking, would recycled plastic packaging be better alternatives than bioplastic in Hong Kong?
So again, it depends. Depends on which type of plastic. It depends on which type of packaging, because so Hong Kong has very limited recycling capacity. Now it's improving, but for only certain type of plastics. For example, right now, I think the recycling facility for PET and HDPE launched by Swire, the Drink Without Waste initiative is now on. No, sorry, it's a Baguio and Alba. It's two different things, sorry. So it should be improved, but yeah, only for PET and HDPE. Actually, Hong Kong exports most of its waste, even its recycling waste, it's recyclable waste, sorry. So if we want to better recycle plastic packaging, then we would really need to pump up our game on the recycling capacity. So that's the main problem.
I think the capacity is not only the only issue. It's actually also capturing the plastics, because like right now, if everything goes into the general bin, say you buy your drink, you are thirsty, you buy something from 7-Eleven, it's a plastic bottle, and you just put it in the general bin, then it's probably ending up there, unless somebody at the back end is going to actually source it out from the trash, which probably doesn't happen. I know there are some initiatives like V-Cycle is trying to work on that on PET bottles. So besides the cardboard grannies who are picking up the cardboard right now, so now they're trying to work with them to actually pick up the PET bottles. So that's one of the initiatives we know about. But also I know that New Life Plastic is trying to get more stock, more feedstock, means more PET bottles that are actually and a PET that is particularly given to them, so that actually can turn into pellets. So it's really important that the whole system works in a kind of like an ecosystem. Otherwise it doesn't work. We can still have a plant, but then the capturing is not effective, and ultimately it goes into the landfill. There's, for instance, also a confusion. Even if you recycle at home and then you go into recycling bin and you put everything that you think is plastic in there, it's still not everything is recycled. Only about 2 types of plastic would be recycled if you put it in a government bin. I'm not talking now about like the different recycling stations where you go and collect, where particular NGOs will be collecting all different types of plastic. You might have seen it in your neighborhood. They will come and will have a bin for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you can come and put it in the right bucket, and those then might be recycled. But even those wrappers, for instance, things like you buy a bag of chips and that has a lot of layers, that will not be probably recycled. That is most likely to be sent out. And again, when we talk recycle in Hong Kong, it's always tricky because it's still not recycled. It means like it's shipped somewhere else where we don't see it, so we can't really say it's recycled for most of the time. Yeah.
I would add to that, actually reread the question of Felix, and it was more the question about if recycled plastic was, I mean, I didn't get the question the first time, but actually with COVID, recycled plastic became more expensive compared to fossil-based because oil doesn't cost anything because because of COVID, the prices dropped. So it's actually more expensive to use recycled plastic than the fossil-based one. So that's also a problem, and that's also the problem I little bit touched upon during the presentation, is that it needs to be economically viable and interesting for companies to use bioplastics or to develop bioplastics. And that's the same for recycled plastic. We see the same limitations. If it's not economically interesting to use recycled plastic, then less people are going to do it. So that's why you have both ends of the questions. Like, can we recycle the plastic to turn it into a recycled plastic? And also, is it interesting to use this recycled plastic? And today the answer is no.
I think we have to have 2 solutions right now. So, I mean, I would say, well, we still need to do something with the plastic that is on the market. It's not going to disappear. So recycling is still important, and important would be to really capture whatever is on the market, because, you know, lots of the plastic is out there. So still better than just, you know, ditching it into the landfill is to make some use out of it. That would be my first line of thought. And then bioplastics, right? So if thinking about bioplastic and they will be really necessary in some place, then I would say, let's try to build the circular systems, and then only if we need to, we use the bioplastic, and then choosing the one that is really home compostable for Hong Kong, because there is like probably no other option. And when I say home compostable, still, even if it's home compostable and you put it in a general bin, then it actually will behave like food, and that actually slows down the degradation of the waste in the landfill. So it still does produce the CO2 emissions, and it still is a problem. So I think that's where I wanted to arrive. We have 2 more questions and we have to conclude because I have to jump onto another event that we have. But there is one more question from Joshua. Is the best long-term solution in multiple use items with a rental return model? And what are the barriers to large-scale adoption?
So that's a very interesting question. So the rental return model has been kind of tried in the US and in France by the company Loop, I think. So you have this kind of experiments that are arriving on the market where people are going to buy, for example, their Häagen-Dazs ice cream online. It's going to arrive into a stainless steel packaging that, once the ice cream is eaten, can be returned to the company in a bag that is also provided by the company. So you have this kind of initiatives. I don't know exactly like their business model, if it's economically viable or not, what are the technical issues of these kind of models, but it's definitely a solution.
I think Aaron could talk about it. So Aaron is on the call. He's from, sorry, I'm like missing all this. Please drink sustainably. That's correct, is it?
Hi, yeah. Yes, yeah, please drink sustainably, that's right. I have seen a little bit about Loop and the reusable systems. I think they have a membership platform, so you pay a little bit extra to have their branded bag, and they come and collect it, I think, once a month or something like that. Unfortunately, I don't know much more detail.
So there's a company, Muse, right now in Hong Kong that is working on this, and I know that Swire has implemented that in one of their shopping malls, I think. So you can actually come get a cup, then you return it back. I know that there are some systems around, and I think Singapore has implemented it recently, where you can actually, there is actually an app where you can see where are the pickup locations for your, say, drinking bottle. If you've forgotten yours or your cup and you want to get it from a coffee shop, you want to have a cup of coffee, you can actually get it at a pickup point. You will get a cup that is cleaned, and then you can go and buy your coffee, and then you will have a drop-off point, which can be a different place. So now there's lots of innovation in that space even happening. So there's an app which actually makes it easy. So you don't have to always carry around your cup, but if there's enough stations around the city, then you can always get a cup, use it, and then drop it off again, and it will be clean. So it's the same system. Not sure how profitable or like how feasible that is, but I think it's an option right now, especially if not all the coffee shops or not all the restaurants are able to give you or are willing to implement circular systems in their operations. So maybe that's also one of the alternatives I've seen recently.
Yeah, so to answer the question, what are the barriers to large-scale adoption? I think, Lucia, you said it quite clearly. You need to have enough drop-off points and pickup points. So you need to really get a lot of people on board so as to make it as convenient as possible, because let's not forget that single-use items are meant to be convenient. So if you don't succeed in reaching the same convenience level, then people are not going to use it. So yeah, I think that's the main barrier.
So we have a last question, but please feel free to email us later if you have any questions when you have read the report. But Nadia is asking, what about Wedgware? Is it a bioplastic?
Yes. So Wedgware is a bioplastic. They are in Hong Kong. They are really well certified. So no problem about the product. But again, as I said, it depends on the local capacity. So it's great to have a biodegradable product or a compostable product. But then I don't know, actually, an interesting question to them would be, are they trying, I don't know, to partner up with like local composters to take care of their product items? I don't know if they're doing that. If anyone has an idea of that, about that, please let us know. But I think it would be interesting for such company if they want to sell their product. I think it should go hand in hand.
So Dana from Plastic Free Seas is saying that there's piloting, trialing with Oak Park at the moment. So yeah, there's some movement, but it's pretty slow. Hopefully there's going to be much more going on as soon as we can find better solutions. I will have to wrap up because this account is supposed to be running another event just now. So we ran out of time, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for the great discussion. Thank you, Camille, for the research.
Thank you, everyone.
Go ahead, read the report. Let us know what you think about it. If you have any comments or more questions, hope to see you again soon at one of our events. By the way, just wanted to say before you drop off, we have a hackathon coming up and we will have an innovation night. So next Saturday at Lai Chi Kok in Explorium Hong Kong, we will host this innovation night. If you'd like to join us, tickets are available. It's very cheap. It will buy you the drink that we're going to put on a table during the networking session, and you can hear more about innovative ideas that are out there and that are happening in Hong Kong. So I think there's one more question, Camille, but I will have to close this.
Yeah, I'll answer I'll send the link. You can close it and I send the link.
That's
and
right.
Everyone can.
Yes, all of you will receive a link to the report, and it's on our website. So we will be in touch.
Yeah, I'll fetch it now.
Thank you very much. Bye bye. Have a nice.
Bye bye.